Hello, and thank you for coming to my presentation on challenging our hacking skills. Compiling everything from the last couple weeks, we're going to try and exploit a vulnerable system of Metasploitable and see what we can do with everything we've learned. So during the planning phase of penetration testing, I'm going to want to discover all devices on the network or within a specific IP space to understand what I'm attacking and how many devices there are. Then I'm going to do basic port scans on the target or targets, but in our case, just one, which will tell me what type of operating systems are being used and give me some more context. Next, I'll want to use tools like OWASP ZOP for web applications or NICTO in order to do a deep scan of all possible vulnerabilities on the target. From the detailed report from OWASP or NICTO, I'll want to actually go and try to exploit one or some of the vulnerabilities. For something like cross-site scripting, I'd use basic scripts to return vulnerable user data or some type of information that will help me establish root access to the remote target. Once a connection is established, I can navigate through the box and add in my own root user so I can log in whenever I'd like. Penetration testing is incredibly valuable to any organization because it will help understand what vulnerabilities exist in the network's current state, how they can be exploited using basic skills or tools, and then research ways to patch or remediate the vulnerabilities. It would also be a good idea to do another scan of the network once we're all done to ensure all vulnerabilities have truly been remediated. There are always going to be new attacks and vulnerabilities that are discovered, but the best and most effective ways to respond to common security failures are isolating affected machines due to hardware failures or incompatibility, implement antivirus or a firewall so they're scanning to report on vulnerabilities, update the antivirus signatures so new exploits are scanned and checked for, lock down all unused ports or default ports and make sure they're secure, change any default passwords because these can be found on the internet and extremely vulnerable. And also apply regular patching and hotfixes. Patching is the single most effective method against known attacks. In order to identify the Metasploitable machine IP address, we'll run an Nmap scan of the network. Since we know our IP address is 192.168.4.38, we then know that the subnet is 192.168.4.0 with a /24, or can make a best guess. So when we run the Nmap scan, we can match the IP address with the Metasploitable MAC address, which we can see is 192.168.4.37. Next, we're just going to make sure that we install Nessus and have a scanning tool in order to give us vulnerability reports. In Nessus, we are going to set the target machine IP address, and as you can see here, we're just setting up the initial basic scan on our target host, which is the Metasploitable 192.168.4.37. After running the initial scan, you can see here that there are some vulnerabilities identified as Metasploitable is an insecure machine. However, we have not yet exploited or attacked any vulnerabilities listed, so the elements are quite short. At the top here, you can see that NFS, exported file shares, and Samba are two of the highest reported vulnerabilities. Next, we're going to run NICTO on our machine. And after doing so, we see that there are many other vulnerabilities identified as well. Just from trying to identify the host operating system, we can see the following vulnerabilities that can be exploited, which are there's the target port of 80, which is open and insecure for HTTP traffic. The Apache kernel appears to be outdated, so known vulnerabilities can be used to exploit the operating system. The target machine is not protected against clickjacking. Apache still has mod negotiation enabled for authentication, which enables attackers to brute force the machine. At least 4 PHP pages reveal potentially sensitive information via HTTP request queries. PHPMyAdmin that manages SQL databases is left unprotected. PHPMyAdmin, which again manages the MySQL databases, is not limited to only protected and verified devices, which would allow unverified responses and requests. The server potentially leaks inodes, allowing for PHP admin to change logs and cover up attack vectors. Apache defaults have never been modified and are easily searchable on Google for vulnerabilities. The PHP directory is able to be located and then modified, and the target is vulnerable to cross-site tracing attacks. So just off of one quick scan, we were able to see all of those vulnerabilities. When running OWASP ZAP against the target IP, you can see even more vulnerabilities found here. A few of them are things like path traversal, lack of anti-cross-site request forgery tokens, directory browsing is not blocked, which would be the NFS, private IPs are disclosed, and so much more. Here, we're going to analyze the risk assessment and gap analysis. Risk assessment is the process where you identify hazards, analyze or evaluate the risk associated with that hazard, and determine appropriate ways to eliminate or control the hazard. Gap analysis instead identifies the differences between desired performance levels and existing performance levels. An organization develops programs and activities to close these gaps. So, for our risks, we were able to see that directory traversal is not blocked from unauthorized users, vulnerable ports are open, and default settings have not been changed. Of course, our desired state for the gap analysis is that there are no vulnerabilities. However, currently, we have many open ports with defaults and no security or encryption whatsoever. The best way to secure and mitigate the vulnerabilities found in our scans would be to close all unused ports and change default passwords. These are available on the internet and very easy to exploit. You'll also want to lock down folder permissions so only admins can access system-level files and folders, and unauthorized changes are not able to be made. Of course, you'll also want to patch the system with the latest vendor released patches and apply any hotfixes that have been recently pushed out. Finally, disabling remote login is never a bad idea, or at least restricting who can remote into the device. Coming up with a strategy is so critical. So we're going to come up with our mitigation strategy because panicking during a crisis is never going to be effective, and it could possibly make the system more vulnerable. Thinking through the steps logically will help harden the system, and then we can re-verify with additional scans to confirm. So when we're applying mitigation, we're going to want to try to exploit the vulnerabilities from our Kali machine, log in as root to Metasploitable and add a new user, then log into the Metasploitable machine with the new user and close any unused ports, change the default passwords, and lock down all folder permissions. So essentially, we need to start with an exploit, but we will remediate in the end. Here, you can see the steps of executing a backdoor execution using the Metasploit console from within our Kali machine. It's able to identify a VSFTP or FTP vulnerability, which allows a backdoor into the Metasploitable machine. Next, you're going to see that we set the R host or the target host to our Metasploitable machine with the 192.168.4.37 IP address. Now I'm able to establish a connection through the backdoor service with FTP and add a new user, which I just used as my last name and a basic password. Now we're going to be able to try to log into the Metasploitable machine, and as you can see, we are successful. So the attack was successful, indicating that FTP is definitely insecure. At this stage, I enabled a firewall of IP tables and disabled unused or insecure ports of FTP, SSH, Telnet, NetBIOS, and NFS. I also changed the admin password for MSF admin so that it's no longer the default. Next, I'm going to restrict access to the MSF admin user to only the root of the system and remove any read, write, and execute access for any standard users. You'll also then see the firewall table here just to confirm that all of our services are disabled. When I rerun the scan from Nessus, we can see that all of our vulnerabilities have been remediated and the system is now properly hardened. Throughout this whole exercise, I certainly learned a few things, and it took some time. To start, it is really easy to use Metasploit to attack a target machine. It basically finds all the known attack commands and can run them against any machine. The key to mitigation is to run regular scans and never leave any default passwords or configurations in place. Implementing mitigations is pretty quick and easy, so it should be checked and implemented often. Also, strategic planning can help you stay organized and focused on how to close those gaps from the gap analysis. Thank you for coming to this presentation.